The poster got ripped as a bright blue light illuminates the spot right before it, bringing the party back to the cinema. Both Hyewon and Jihye realize that the poster got ripped after they finish the story, and Dokja encourages them to keep moving. The cinema at the exit of one of Chungmuro Station became a theater dungeon from the basement to the rooftop. Young-hyuk completed tearing all the posters on the second and third floors as they keep going up. When they got to the fourth floor, Jihye got seasick as soon as they entered a new dungeon. They appear on the Titanic ship, with Hyewon becoming the leading actress. Jihye keeps throwing up, while Dokja wonders if Jihye is supposed to be the leading character. Suddenly, someone yells the name Jack while pointing at Gilyoung. The party then realize he's the leading actor. After capturing the antagonist in Titanic, they immediately discuss what they should do next because it's not enough to finish the ending. Knowing that the theater master is a psycho, Jihye suggests killing the antagonist, a revolting suggestion that makes Dokja surprised. The antagonist being human creates conflicting emotions for Hyewon, while Jihye emphasizes their vulnerability. She stops hesitating anyway as she stabs the antagonist, and the theater master is pleased with the ending. Everyone is stunned at what happened while Jihye tells Dokja they don't have much time to spare because Young-hyuk could be in danger. She confidently asks him to speed through every story, making Dokja think about his position in this scenario, or the characters he used to read in a novel and the real people meet inside a screw-up world. There were no movies when they reached the 5th floor because it turns out to be a reward room. Dokja realizes that the storage contains several movie props, which may not be as valuable as his sword, but still possess the same power. The Mikazuki Munechika sword captivates Hyewon, and as she holds it, she marveled at its sharpness and lightness. She decides to keep the sword, and Dokja tells her to pick a weapon for Sanga while he picks up a shield for Hyun-sung. A moment later, he hears Jihye struggling to pick up a hammer belonging to Thor called Mjolnir, so he teases her that the hammer could only be wielded by special people, and Gilyoung hears their debate as he picks up a hat. He is curious and approaches them as he put on his hat. Jihye scolds him for taking her items when he grabs the handle and quickly lifts it from its box. Both Jihye and Dokja are stupefied looking at it. Gilyoung wants to keep it so Dokja lets him, which in turn makes Jihye so stunned knowing both Hyewon and Gilyoung got incredible new weapons while she left with nothing. Hyewon then asks Dokja what items he would pick for himself, which makes him confused for a bit before something gets his attention. He picks a reinforced armor suits that increase his agility, and after he's done wearing them, he asks everyone to get going. Young-hyuk is already on the rooftop with a pair of empty eyes, indicating that he's been hypnotized, while Dokja and the party rush up the stairs after finishing the movies on the 6th floor and still haven't met Young-hyuk. Fortunately, they got rewarded with a skill book called Sharp Observation. Dokja is the first to step foot on the 7th floor, which makes him surprised to see all the movies are already ripped. He immediately rushes through the floor followed by his party, hoping that no more movies are intact. Out of nowhere, he notices a movie poster still intact and need to be completed, which shoot the beam light catching the party. He can only curses on the situation because finishing these movies will slow them down. In the next moment, Dokja instantly aware of the smell of the ocean and wonders what movie they're in. The ocean billows swirl into an angry whirlpool as the man on board yells for everyone to get down and protect themselves. Soldiers on the other ship began to shoot at them, and Dokja quickly used his shield to protect himself. At the same time, Hyewon and Gilyoung ducked as low as possible to avoid getting hit by the bullets. Someone ordered to get the ship to turn around when the bullets didn't stop firing. But it's too late because the ship is devastated and some parts are burning. Both Hyewon and Gilyoung hide behind on Dokja's shield while he silently curses Young-hyuk for leaving the most challenging movie to clear. This is known on the history of the Battle of Myeongyang. Then Hyewon points at dozens of ships approaching them and wonders how they're supposed to beat that. When their ship is caught in the whirlpool, the enemy ships are getting closer. Dokja tries to remain calm as he turns back, but he's surprised when no ships are behind him, because based on the history, they should still have 12 more ships. So he approaches one of the soldiers still alive and asks where their General Sun Chin-Lee is. The man is confused and does not know the name. Surprised, Dokja wonders if the Master Theater can change the story's content. Should they win the war now without General Sun Chin-Lee? For a moment, Dokja is silent. He looks at Hyewon, who is protecting Gilyoung, before he calls out Jihye. He had previously read the book obtained on the 6th floor and read the characters a bit. He asks why Admiral Lee picks her as his avatar when she gets seasick every time they're on a boat. Jihye says that's because she's the descendant of some admiral. Dokja realizes that Jihye probably has a close relationship with Admiral Sun Chin-Lee, so he yells her name. But on that ship, Dokja didn't see Jihye anywhere, so he kept looking for her and found her crouching on the corner. Dokja approaches her and asks if she's alright, and he finds her crying and tells him that she can't do it. And seeing it, the constellation of naval warfare god looked at her in pity. Dokja immediately knows she isn't talking to him, so he asks her if she can endure it a little longer. Although Jihye exclaims that he doesn't know anything, Dokja knows exactly why she's sad. Dokja knows she's not scared because of seasickness but because her late friend used to like this movie. Jihye is shocked when the memories of when she killed her friend play back in her mind like a broken record. She wonders how Dokja knows it, and silently, Dokja knows almost everything about her and why she's picked by the Admiral when she hates the sea and doesn't care about anything. Dokja then remembered chatting with Jihai, who said she was a descendant of Admiral Lee's comrade, Iaki Lee. Dokja just remembered the history where Admiral Iaki Lee led the Joseon army to victory along with Admiral Sunsen Lee. But in his last moment, he isn't left with enough stories to become a constellation. That's why Admiral Sunsen Lee chooses her to be his avatar, because he couldn't watch the descendant of his old friend become a demon after killing her friend. In the middle of a war, a bounty scenario was suddenly given to Dokja. It's written that the naval warfare god is asking for his help to cheer up Jihai and win this war for 2 hours, and as a reward, he could earn a stigma from the admiral. Dokja is surprised by the reward that would be obtained. If he could win the war, he could get one of the admiral's stigmas without entering into a contract. But the war situation is getting worse. The enemy's warships began to throw their anchor to their ship and surround them from every side. They will destroy the ship, and Dokja is panicking when he grabs Jihai by her shoulder and tells her he doesn't have much time to explain. Even if she could run from here, she'll never be forgiven. But if she wakes up now, she can at least save some people. Meanwhile, the enemy started to board their ships, and Heewon and Gilyoung were now under siege. They fought with all their might against a large number of enemies. Then rifle guns started attacking the ship's crew. Luckily, Dokja can hold it off with his shield. He turns and calls Jihai, but she's still crying. She remembers when she watched movies with her friend, and then she yelled at Dokja that she didn't deserve to live. Dokja is struggling to hold off the bullets that are relentlessly being shot at them while thinking that he's no different than her for exploiting their skills to survive. But he tells Jihai that this is a new world and a reality they must live, so she should redeem her mistakes for the rest of her life or keep living a despicable life. While fighting, Dokja gets increasingly irritated with Jihai's condition, so he asks her if she genuinely wants to die here. Knowing Jihai's complicated feelings, his understanding of her character has improved, and his Omniscient Reader Viewpoint exclusive skill level 2 activated. Dokja could hear Jihai wanting to survive, and she reached for her sword while still sobbing. She has a determined look in her eyes. She slowly opens her sword, preparing to help Dokja, Heewon, and Gilyoung, who are still fighting. Dokja sees this situation and thinks about how the constellations are selfish. They don't always send help when asked for it, and many of them don't care whether their avatar dies or not. But they never miss the chance to help their incarnation when their story is involved. Jihai pierced her sword into the floorboard as she received a new stigma, and her body was enveloped in great power. Dokja smiled and was slightly upset that he indirectly helped Junghyuk awaken Jihai's power. On the other side, a sea whirlpool arose around the ship while the enemy came to attack Jihai only to stumble on his feet. The wave she creates swerves all the ships violently before the whirlpool shoots to the top at high speed and knocks down every ship around. The rest of the remaining ships are left with confusion when suddenly mysterious warships emerge from the whirlpool. Those warships quickly outnumbered the enemy ships, and everyone was amazed by the arrival of ships from nowhere. Dokja, in particular, is happy with it, while the enemy is left with trepidation about what comes next. Jihai's body is shrouded in the aura of her ancestral power as she stares sharply at the enemy. She unplugs her sword from the floor and directs it forward, which is the command to shoot the enemy ships there. In the next moment, explosions occurred everywhere, as a giant cannon shot straight at the enemy and destroyed their ships in its wake. The name of her stigma is the Ghost Fleet, and they didn't stop firing unless she willed it to stop, making her the naval commander. But she doesn't stop there. She jumps at her enemies and continues fighting. In only 1 hour, they can destroy all enemy ships because the Ghost ship's cannon is so powerful that it takes only one shot to split the enemy ship in half. All the enemy soldiers fall to the ocean, and it will not stop until the last remaining enemy ship drowns, while Dokja, Heewon, and Gilyoung watch in awe. At last, their entire enemy is destroyed, and Jihai is left panting and exhausted. But a message from the system appears and tells them Master Theater is satisfied with the final ending of this film. Jihai has killed all the remaining enemy soldiers aboard the ships and left a trail of blood over the floor. The ghost ships then disappeared, and Heewon stretched out her hand to Jihai, still kneeling on the floor. She tells Jihai how amazing her power is, and Gilyoung praises her too, while Dokja is slightly scared of her immense power, knowing full well Junghyuk could exploit it for his own gain. Then he got a message that his bounty scenario had been resolved, and Dokja started to wonder if he would also receive the same stigma as Jihai. But the message from the system says he has received a stigma sword song, which surprises him to the core because Jihai won't get this stigma until much later in the story. However, he's glad because this stigma will benefit him going forward. Suddenly, a bright blue light entered his chest, and Dokja wonders if he had it as he tried to feel it through his chest but couldn't be sure. The scene began to fade above them as a sign that they had finished the scenario when Dokja got a notification that the naval warfare god was grateful toward him. When he looks at Jihai's face, he's glad they could end the movie this way. They are back in the theater room, and Jihai looks tired, so Dokja tells her to rest, and she tries to argue. However, Dokja says she has to do as he told her to. Jihai finally complied, and he told her to stick this one out because he needed to focus on fighting the theater master and not worrying about her. Dokja, Heewon, and Gilyoung immediately ran to the 8th floor. Dokja has to quickly save Junghyuk because if he dies, this world ends. He had used the elixir and coins collected to increase the stats level and hoped it'd be enough to save him. They kept running until they reached the 8th floor, and Dokja was the first to go through the invisible barrier before a message told them that they had entered the 8th floor called the Sky Garden. And right in front of Dokja, Young-hyuk stands alone and doesn't seem to notice Dokja behind him. Hee-won and Gil-young catch up to Dokja, and she points out that Young-hyuk looks fine and not in danger like what Dokja had told her before. Dokja is clearly annoyed because after what he's been through, he's fine all along, so he quickly approaches him. Dokja then smacked Young-hyuk on the head with his shield, and Hee-won was surprised to see it. He feels satisfied after hitting Young-hyuk so hard because he's been waiting to get his revenge. But when Young-hyuk doesn't respond, he knows something is wrong. Dokja tries to call him, but he doesn't answer, and when he looks at him, his aura is not like the Young-hyuk he knew. He remembers Young-hyuk dying on the 8th floor in his 8 regressions because he's unlucky. And when Dokja looks ahead, the Master Theater has taken the figure of an older man sitting on a bench wearing a hat. Dokja panicked a little because he was the boss of the theater dungeon and the worst opponent for Young-hyuk. Dokja realizes he's too late, and Young-hyuk is entirely in the theater master's grip. His eyes are blank, and Dokja tries to reason with him, hoping that he can reach his subconscious, but to no avail because Young-hyuk punches him in the gut. Taken by surprise, Dokja is unable to dodge, and that single punch blasting him several yards away. Young-hyuk uses Force Palm to attack, as Dokja hit the dungeon barrier, messing him up. He throws up blood as his armor suit is damaged, reducing his defense stats. Seeing Dokja thrown with a single punch, Hee-won unsheathed her sword, screaming her companion's name. She activates her demon-slaying skill and goes for an attack towards Young-hyuk. Unfortunately, he doesn't lost his fighting prowess even after being taken over, so he notices her. Even then, mustering all of her power, Hee-won doesn't stop and keeps going through with her attack. Meanwhile, Dokja is losing his voice because of the impact and unable to warn Hee-won that Young-hyuk is stronger than her. She makes her swing, which Young-hyuk easily avoids and immediately grabs one of Hee-won's hand. Hee-won has little time to respond when she sees Young-hyuk's hand beside her face. Luckily, she can dodge it. She grits her teeth and kicks Young-hyuk's hand so she can escape his grip. Then she jumps as far as possible to create distance while realizing it won't be an easy fight. To her surprise, Young-hyuk quickly catches up to her, and she has no time to dodge his attack. On the other hand, Jae goes up the stairs, wanting to help, when he hears a clanging sound followed by a loud crash right in front of her. Then she sees a shadow between the dust and is shocked to see Hee-won sprawled unconscious against the wall. Dokja screams from the garden and warns Jae of Young-hyuk, who does not stop attacking everyone in front of him. Taken by surprise, Jae is stunned and can't move an inch when she sees that Young-hyuk is about to hit her. One punch was ready to land on her, and Jae barely escaped it. She wonders what happened to Young-hyuk when Dokja explains that he's under the theater master's control. So, he tells her to attack the theater master directly, who lays back chilling at the bench, as he smiles at the helpless party, feeling confident that no one can come near him because he has Young-hyuk as his personal bodyguard. Jae immediately ran towards the theater master, but unfortunately, Young-hyuk caught up to her from the side. With his speed, Young-hyuk easily catches up to her and strikes her as she has no way to dodge or block the kick. The strike lands on her face, instantly knocking her down. Witnessing from behind, unleashing her sword technique, Hee-won, who manages to get back on her feet, dashes straight for another strike. With little consciousness she has, Jae sees her and immediately rolls her body to muster a moment to counter Young-hyuk. But once again, one that is supposed to be the antagonist in the story, Young-hyuk sees what's coming then jumps to avoid their combined attack. Both Hee-won and Jae are shocked to see Young-hyuk hovering above them. However, that doesn't stop Hee-won from activating her Time of Judgment skill along with Gil-young, who helps her by using Thunder of Mjolnir. Gil-young uses the lightning strike toward Young-hyuk, but he can easily withstand it by making a shield wall. Seeing that Gil-young's attack had failed, Hee-won planned to use her exclusive skill, but the constellation kept quiet at her request, therefore, she couldn't use it. Meanwhile, Young-hyuk is preparing to attack her from above, and she still wonders why it won't work. In the end, both Hee-won and Jae couldn't dodge his punches. On the other hand, Dokja knows Young-hyuk is a strong person, but he's always good. He decides to activate his profiling skill, which summarizes his profile. He keeps reading the statistics and realizes something. It turns out that Young-hyuk had activated his stigma called Transmission Level 1. It allows Young-hyuk to awaken the skills he had in the past. Time after time, Dokja holds Gil-young's shoulder, asking him to prepare himself, and he apologizes to him. Dokja doesn't want to do this, but there is no other choice. He took out the elixir from the T-Rex and immediately drank it, and it instantly increased all of his stats by 10 and lasted 30 minutes. Afterward, his body is engulfed with energy as he draws his sword. He was ready to attack, thinking the skill gap between them wasn't that far, while Young-hyuk took out his sword before him. They are now facing each other, and without saying much, they move forward. Both of them swung their swords back to get momentum, and a loud clang echoed in the air when their swords collided. Then they stepped back to get a distance, but Young-hyuk didn't waste any time to charge ahead. A sword fight ensued, and Young-hyuk's movement was more violent until Dokja could only resist and cornered. Dokja can't keep up with his attacks, so he activates his Omniscient Reader Viewpoint skill to read Young-hyuk's mind. He finds what he is looking for through the little consciousness he has left. Young-hyuk cries out that he is tired and defeated, wondering how often he has to repeat his failure. After hearing it, Dokja is bitter, and through his anger he finds strength to counter the strike and yells at him to get a hold of himself. Then he punches Young-hyuk's face while telling him how idiot he is. But that punch is not powerful enough to knock Young-hyuk down. While inside Young-hyuk's mind, he keeps telling himself that everything will return to the beginning if he regresses. And Dokja knows that his unstable mind allowed him to be controlled by the theater master. If only his mental barrier was at level 8, then none of this would have happened. He hears how Young-hyuk is ready to give up on everything, and that angers him. Dokja grits his teeth and tells Young-hyuk about the promise he made for himself to never give up. Dokja unleashes his anger to attack Young-hyuk and keeps trying to remind him about his purpose to create a better life. But Dokja's voice failed to reach him as he counters the strikes that came his way. Dokja wonders why he became so emotional, and he couldn't think about what he should do, so he just kept fighting. His last attack could match Young-hyuk's strength, and their clash breaking the ground beneath them. Suddenly, his fourth wall skill resonates after he hears Young-hyuk feel lonely, surprising Dokja. He looks at Young-hyuk as he gets angrier because Young-hyuk still thinks he's all alone when Dokja has to overcome many obstacles trying to become his companion. He attacks Young-hyuk again, aiming for his chest, but Young-hyuk stops it with his sword. Dokja screams how he could feel alone when he has a companion who tries to help him, as Dokja reminds him of his past mistakes in his regression, at times when he died like a fool in the theater and cried over his little sister who died, or when the prophet stabbed him in the back. He doesn't stop attacking Young-hyuk, and each strike is countered perfectly, but it doesn't stop Dokja from reminding him how it feels when he loses his child or wins the battle against the Demon King. Dokja gets carried away by remembering when he spent reading Young-hyuk's experiences through Tessa when he struggled. Dokja keeps screaming at Young-hyuk that he watched him fight to survive, and that's what his petty little life went through back then. The battle is fiercer, and Dokja is surprised to see Young-hyuk disappear before his eyes. He gets too carried away, fails to anticipate Young-hyuk's next moves when he is supposed to stall for time. Young-hyuk appears behind Dokja, trying to land a sneak attack. Fortunately, Dokja's reflex saves him from the lightning speed strike, using his sword to defend as the ground beneath them keeps crumbling because of the collision of their power. Dokja keeps holding on as hard as he can when through his skill, he hears Young-hyuk wonders who he is. That stutters him for a moment, and when Dokja looks into Young-hyuk's eyes, they're no longer empty. Dokja is shocked that Young-hyuk's consciousness starts to return before he asks who he is. The excessive immersion had caused the fourth wall to shake, and they dash away from each other for a moment, as Dokja wonders if what he said snaps Young-hyuk back into himself, while Young-hyuk keeps wondering the man in front of him is. The theater master jumps off his seat, knowing he is losing control on Young-hyuk, so he tries to strengthen his controlling spell, bringing pain to Young-hyuk before his consciousness is under control again as his body is enveloped in the aura of the master's power. Young-hyuk immediately attacked Dokja again, and he reflexively held his ground, wondering how Young-hyuk could become stronger in a short period. Dokja tries to get through Young-hyuk again, reminding him that he has allowed Dokja to hit him if he can, as Gil-young is activating his skill from behind, trying to summon bugs beyond his power nearby. Now, Dokja has to give everything he can, so he activates his skill, enveloping his sword with flames. Dokja keeps attacking, leaving trails of flames with each swing of Dokja's sword that is able to suppress Young-hyuk. But Dokja doesn't stop there. He activates another one of his skills, the Sword Song, the gift from the naval warfare god. With that skill, the strung words appear and instantly change, forming dozens of bows behind Dokja. His body is enveloped in the power of the constellation, and having a determination in his eyes, Dokja unleashes his attack. Dozens of lightning arrows shoot toward Young-hyuk. He has no way to deal with them and can only evading the arrows coming his way. Assuming that his skill will be able to hold Young-hyuk off for a bit, Dokja dashes toward the theater master. He's ready to kill the theater master when Young-hyuk glares at him from behind. Young-hyuk had used recovery level 2 to heal himself, and then, with lightning speed, he caught up to Dokja. Dokja is shocked that Young-hyuk has already jumped in front of him, so he yells at Gil-young to do his part now. In that instant, a sudden attack from outside of the area destroyed the theater master's barrier. A grade 6 monarch level insect called Titanoptera answers Gil-young's summon and goes through the broken barrier. Everyone there is amazed by its large size, and the insect immediately comes to target the theater master. But Young-hyuk reflexively holds its attack. The theater master is happy that Young-hyuk can protect him from the giant mantis, but then Dokja appears behind him. One slash is ready to be given, but the master theater activates his mind control skill and tries to hypnotize him as well. Dokja couldn't hold back when the master found his way to his mind. He strolls into Dokja's mind and stumbles upon his memory of reading Tessa, but the words stack over each other, making it hard for the master to actually read it, and not long after, the fourth wall is activated. Dokja regains his consciousness and is ready to slash the theater master. The master is too stunned to do anything until Dokja's sword directly lands on his head. Then, his body disappears right after Dokja's sword hits the ground. The master's theater was eventually defeated, and Dokja wonders what had just happened. It doesn't occur to him that the master was just another simulation. Dokja earned 9,000 coins for defeating the theater master, while he feels glad with how the fourth wall has saved him when Gil-young comes over and passes out right into his arm. He then panics when he realizes that the giant insect is still there and Young-hyuk is passed out on the ground. But to his surprise, the Titanoptera immediately left after the barrier disappeared. Dokja's weary body collapsed, his arms tightly cradling Gil-young after the excruciating battle with Young-hyuk buffed with Theater Master's empowering spell. Hee-won and Jae, their faces filled with concern, approached Dokja slowly before Hee-won asked how he's doing. A notification suddenly appears before them, illuminating the dim surroundings. The words declared that the third scenario was drawing to an end. Everyone's heart sank as they looked down at the city of Seoul beneath them. The once vibrant metropolis is now devastated, with burning buildings and the haunting silence of lives lost. Gil-young, finally awake, looked up at the sky and noticed the shooting stars streaking across the city. He couldn't help but make a wish, the innocence of the gesture in stark contrast to the grim reality around them. Meanwhile, deep down, Dokja knows those shooting stars were omens of more bad scenarios. Then Gil-young turns to Dokja and asks about his wish. Hee-won argues that the wish won't come true if they talk about it. Dokja, his gaze fixed on Young-hyuk, who's still lying on the ground, wishing to see a particular ending of a novel. He then walks away with his party by his side and looks at the shattered city before leaving the rooftop. Another notification stated that the third main scenario had finished, and each of them received 1,000 coins as a reward. Suddenly, a notification about the fourth scenario appears. Dokja is surprised by its unexpected arrival and quickly realizes the gravity of the situation. Turning to Jae, he urgently instructs her to stay on the rooftop with the still unconscious Young-hyuk. Jae nods in agreement, her concern evident as she watches over Young-hyuk's condition. Dokja carefully lifts Gil-young onto his back while making his way down the station, when he suddenly receives a message from Bae-hyung. The message mentions that some of the words Dokja had spoken to Young-hyuk earlier were censored, as constellations are not all-knowing, and Bae-hyung didn't want Dokja's words to disrupt the flow of his channel. Dokja realizes that his knowledge about Young-hyuk's regression may have been filtered to hide that Young-hyuk is a regressor. But what surprised him the most was to learn that Bae-hyung couldn't hear what he said, leaving Dokja to wonder if it was a restriction imposed by the feasibility. Bae-hyung assists Dokja with notifications from the constellations, and Dokja decides to focus on messages from the highest-paying constellations, indicating that there are numerous messages to sift through. Hee-won offers to carry Gil-young, and Dokja agrees to her help. However, as he looks at her, he notices many questions written on her face. Curious and somewhat nervous, Dokja asks Hee-won if she heard what he said during his confrontation with Young-hyuk. To his surprise, Hee-won admits she heard some of it, intensifying Dokja's unease. She proceeds to inquire about his true identity, and as Dokja glances at the sleeping Gil-young on her back, he cautiously admits that he possesses knowledge about the future. Dokja is taken aback when Hee-won asks if he intends to kill her now that she knows this secret, slowly backing away from him, simultaneously making Dokja annoyed. In an attempt to convince her otherwise, Dokja explains that the upcoming scenarios will be even more dangerous, potentially leading to the death of someone close to them. He earnestly asks Hee-won to become his companion, seeking her unwavering support. Finally, as they arrive at the station, Dokja spots Pildu's gang surrounding Hyunsung and Sanga, demanding to meet him. Hyunsung and Sanga visibly relax when Dokja calls out to them, and he swiftly approaches them. Dokja glances at Pildu and notices that he appears to be drained of power. Suddenly, a notification informs them that the fourth main scenario will begin in 5 minutes. Pildu expresses anger toward Dokja, but Dokja remains nonchalant. Bae-hyung suddenly appears and provides essential information about the upcoming scenario. Dokja starts to wonder if things might become more chaotic with the involvement of other stations when Bae-hyung mentions a prerequisite mission they must complete. The notification reveals that they must choose a leader for the Chungnyeoro station. To everyone's surprise, they learn that the leader will be determined by whoever can capture the white flag at the center of the platform. Moments later, the flag materializes not far from them, and Pildu wastes no time attempting to seize it. However, Dokja intervenes, ordering Pildu to stand down. His authority to command, stemming from a contract with Pildu's constellation, ensures compliance and shoves Pildu to the ground. Dokja calmly steps on Pildu and claims the flag, instantly feeling a power surge. The rules state that others have 5 minutes to try and take the flag from him. Pildu angrily instructs his gang to retrieve the flag while Dokja's party rush to protect him. Dokja quickly passes his shield to Hyunsung, designating it as his new defensive weapon. Hyunsung enthusiastically moves in front of Dokja and activates his particular skill called Area Defense, shielding Dokja and the rest of the party from the advancing gang members. Pildu intends to use his skill to attack them, but Dokja silences him with a command. Dokja insists that Pildu deactivate his skill, angering Pildu, but he is ordered to remain silent for half an hour. Unable to speak, Pildu becomes incapacitated, and Dokja seizes the opportunity to address his gang. Recognizing that they are outnumbered, Dokja informs them they have 2 choices, leave Chungnyeoro or stay with him. He emphasizes the need for more allies but acknowledges the importance of trustworthy companions, especially when he gazes at Hee-won. Recalling his earlier request for Hee-won to become his companion, Dokja wonders if she feels the same way amidst the escalating tension and uncertainty. He then earnestly conveys to her that carrying this burden doesn't have to weigh her down, as it can benefit both of them. her strength in exchange for his knowledge about the future. Hyewon is silent for a moment, before asking about her role in the future, to which Dokja answers that she's not in the future that he knows. Contemplating the gravity of the situation, Hyewon asserts that she needs time to think. However, Dokja emphasizes his need for her, as she could hold a crucial role in the future he strives to shape. Meanwhile, Pildu's gang is taken aback at the station by Dokja's sudden request. Dokja presses them for immediate answers, stressing that he won't penalize those who wish to leave. Yet, they must adhere to his rules if they opt to stay. Some accuse him of trying to establish himself as a king. Dokja elucidates his intentions, assuring them that he aims to protect them from external threats but won't interfere in internal group issues. Hearing his explanation, Myunggo advises Pildu to leave. However, shock ripples through the group when Dokja informs them that Pildu is now his employee because of the contract. With only 5 people remaining, Dokja now leads a group of 24. Some of them come trying to apologize to Dokja, but he deflects as he's suggesting they seek forgiveness elsewhere. Simultaneously, Dokja receives a message indicating that his current fame is insufficient for him to be a king. Meanwhile, Baehyung seizes the moment to initiate the scenario. With a snap of his fingers, everyone is immediately briefed on the details of the next scenario called Capture the Flag, which will run for 12 days. The conditions involve defending their station while occupying other stations by planting their flag. Amid their tense situation and how intently focused their expressions are, everyone reads the scenario's details. With determination in his eyes, Dokja aimed to complete it without losing any one of his party member. Hyewon took charge and read the rules out loud, while Hyunsung emphasized that their target was Changsan Station. A flicker of annoyance crossed Hyewon's face when Dokja silently hinted that he already knew this, and Sangha couldn't help but wonder if they'd have to fight other people again. Hyunsung reassured Sangha that they could potentially ally with another station. But Dokja and Hyewon exchanged knowing glances, fully aware that in the world of scenarios, there was no such thing as a deathless scenario. Curiosity led Hyewon to inquire about the distance to Changsan Station, prompting a discussion on how to divide their group, with some staying to protect and others scouting ahead. Meanwhile, the holographic barrier between the stations began to dissipate. Amidst the debate, Dokja's gaze shifted to Pildu, who still lay on the floor, nursing his silent anger. Dokja felt the need to make Pildu understand the gravity of the situation. He urged Pildu to guard the station and promise suitable rewards for his cooperation, alluding to the significance this held for his separated family. Pildu is so bewildered, asking how Dokja know about his family, when suddenly a motorcycle gang approached their station, as loud engines echoing through the tunnels. Everyone's attention snapped to the approaching headlights, and tension filled the air. 4 members of the gang dismounted and exchanged words. Dokja wondered if the invasion had begun so early in the scenario. The gang members' conversation hinted at scenarios running differently between stations. Unbeknownst to the gang, Dokja, Hyunsung, and Hyewon approached them, weapons ready. One of the gang members attempted to convince Dokja they weren't there to fight, introducing himself as Ilhan Kang from the Dongdaemun group. Dokja's skepticism led him to activate his profiling skill, and as it yielded results, he began to suspect that Ilhan might be a character from Tessa. When Dokja disclosed his name, Ilhan appeared taken aback but maintained his smile. Ilhan identified Dokja as the station leader with the white flag, and Dokja promptly ordered him to leave. Ilhan persisted, claiming they sought an alliance, but Hyewon voiced her distrust, finding the newcomers suspicious. On the other hand, they still trying to convince Dokja that their target was not Chungnyeoro. However, Dokja probed further, asking what they would do if his target were Dongdaemun. Ilhan reveals that he knows which group is targeting his station, so he proposes an alliance. Dokja is considering the offer, but he wants to meet their leader first. So Ilhan offers him a ride to their station, which Dokja accepts. On their way to the station, Sangha is wondering why they choose Chungnyeoro when other nearby stations are available for an alliance. Ilhan is visibly struggling to respond, raising more suspicions among the group. Nevertheless, Dokja proceeds with the plan, leaving Gilyoung with Pildu. During their ride, he asked Ilhan about any rumors concerning Chungnyeoro. Ilhan was unaware, prompting Dokja to mention Younghyuk. This revelation startled Ilhan and alarmed the party. Right at that moment, they got off the bike, as Sangha deployed her magical rope. She used it to immobilize the gang members and their bikes on the railway while simultaneously easing up her party members' landing. Ilhan appeared bewildered, and it turned out to be part of Dokja's plan all along. Before they went with Ilhan's offer, Dokja discussed their strategy with the rest and reminded his party they would feign interest and follow them while remaining cautious. That maneuver saved them from an ambush, because there were so many gang members hiding behind nearby pillars. Now Dokja and his party are ready to make their counter as the hidden group immediately brandished their weapons, poised to attack. Hyewon activated her time of judgment skill, eliminating numerous adversaries, surprising herself as the skill worked effectively despite her prior difficulty. Hyunsung and Sangha managed to eliminate the remaining gang members. Dokja threatened to kill Ilhan but stopped when he sensed something was amiss in their station. He turned with dread to see their station under siege by another group. Panic set in, and Dokja realized that this group was from Myeongdong and had allied with Dongdaemun for the assault. The leader orders the others to focus on planting the flag first, and Dokja immediately knows he's the leader, the red flag he wears on his head. His name is Hyunti Kim, and he activates the effect of the red flag, buffing his group members to receive a 5% increase in their stats. Dokja knows that the color of the flags determines the victor in the Battle of Flags, transitioning from white to red, navy, brown, purple, and finally, black. Dokja concludes that since he possesses a red flag, they need to either take over another station or eliminate its leader and seize the flag, but that alone won't be enough to conquer Chungnyeoro. Because of its defense capabilities, especially with Pildu around while gritting his teeth, he activates his militarized zone skill to protect the station. His guns start firing at the unexpected enemy, causing them to run in fear as they witness their comrades being shot. Hyunti instructs his group to leave the station, but Dokja intercepts them on their way out with his sword already ablaze. He swings it through the group to create a distraction, allowing Pildu's weapons to eliminate them. Quickly, everyone from Myeongdong meets their demise, leaving only their flag behind. Pildu, from the platform, notices the flag first and attempts to grab it. However, Dokja threatens him with a hit, prompting Pildu to retreat to the station while Dokja seizes the flag. Instantly, his flag changes to red, boosting his and his group members' stats. Dokja then questions Pildu about the necessity of killing everyone from Myeongdong, as he believes they could have gained important information from one of them. His curiosity intensifies when Ilhan appears surprised that Dokja leads Chungnyeoro, making him wonder if the so-called prophets informed Ilhan about it. After Hyunsung brings Ilhan to the station and Sanga ties him with her rope, Hyun suggests torturing Ilhan until he tells the truth. Still, Dokja decides to kill him if he doesn't talk. Pulling his sword and dragging it across the floor, Dokja threatens Ilhan. He counts down, pointing the sword at Ilhan's face during the final count. This terrifies Ilhan enough that he blurts out Dongnyo Station. Ilhan reveals that the prophets reside in Dongnyo and inform him about Chungnyeoro. However, in the middle of his explanation, he begins to choke. Dokja quickly realizes that it's a form of hypnosis to prevent information leakage. Dokja instructs Sanga to silence him, knowing hypnosis can only be used face to face. As long as they have Ilhan, he can guide them in the right direction. Meanwhile, from the rooftop, night turns into morning. Jihai is startled when Dokja suddenly asks if Younghyuk is still unconscious. As Dokja approaches, Jihai wonders if Younghyuk will be okay. Dokja assures her that he will recover but might be a little traumatized. He informs Jihai that he knows Younghyuk better than anyone else. Dokja then hands a letter to Jihai, advising her to not read it but to give it to Younghyuk when he wakes up. But he has a strong feeling that Jihai will read it nonetheless. It doesn't worry him because only Younghyuk will understand it. Dokja grimaces when a constellation tells him that he hates censorship before Jihai wants to ask him something. But Jihai stumbles on her words when she mentions his fight with Younghyuk earlier. Dokja tries to play dumb when he sweats all over, fearing that Jihai heard everything. Suddenly, Jihai exaggeratingly yells his words to Younghyuk earlier in the fight, and Dokja is surprised. She keeps going about how Dokja tried to remind Younghyuk why he followed him, and Dokja couldn't understand it. She keeps yelling about how Dokja told Younghyuk to think about their kid before finally telling Dokja that she'll ensure that Younghyuk reads his love letter. It is a big misunderstanding. And a moment later, a series of messages from constellations is being surprised to learn that he and Younghyuk are a couple. Dokja could only silently curse them for believing Jihai's nonsense from her misunderstanding. However, she doesn't stop annoying him because when he leaves, she asks how he and Younghyuk could have a child, and he just tells her to ask Younghyuk when he wakes up. As he walks down the stairs, he reviews the novel. He tries to remember if he ever read about the prophets. Still, he can't find it, which means the possibility is the chain of events he caused makes another prophet like Anna Croft appear or people like her who read Tessa but never finished it. After he arrives at the station, he brings Hyunsung and Sanga to Myeongdong Station. In the middle of the way, Dokja tries to assure Hyunsung that they don't want to fight but to figure out what they'll do to the remaining group members. He knows they could be drifters if they're lucky, but most will fall prey to other groups, like the members of Pildu's gang who left. When Dokja turns to Sanga, he sees her defeated look and asks if she's disappointed they couldn't make peace with other groups. When she tells him she's disappointed, Dokja says she can't trust people easily. If she does, it'll be easier for her in the future, but she tells Dokja that she could make it this far because she put her trust in him. He is shocked and before he can respond, Hyunsung calls him. They notice that people inside the station are killed by other groups. When they notice another group has arrived on the railway, they immediately jump on their bikes and ride away. Hyunsung can only wonder who they are, while Dokja notices how they quickly run away as if they knew he was coming. When they enter the station, it turns out it's not occupied. So, Dokja plants his flag and takes over the Myeongdong station. As he occupied the second station, the hidden scenario called the King's Path opens up for him. It states that Dokja has to occupy 10 stations in 10 days to earn the King's attribute, and his failure means death for him and the rest of his party members. This is the worst case scenario Dokja had been expecting. When Dokja, Hyunsung, and Sanga arrived back at Chungnyeoro, they found a moment to gather and discuss what had happened to Hee-won. With her brow furrowed with concern, Sanga voiced her belief that the scenario had become overwhelmingly complex. On the other hand, having admiration in his eyes, Hyunsung expressed his satisfaction that Dokja had taken the lead in their group. He playfully suggested addressing Dokja as His Majesty since he was on the path to earning a king attribute, eliciting a touch of discomfort from Dokja. Hyewon couldn't resist mocking Dokja for the jest as well. With a mild frown, Dokja interrupted their banter and suggested they first gather information about their enemy. Turning to Ilhan, he requested that his company, Hyewon and Hyunsung, venture to Dongmyo Station, where Sanga is puzzled about her role, so she inquired about her part in their plan. So Dokja tells her that she should stay in the station, making her a little disappointed. But Dokja explains that everyone possesses unique skills and roles, reassuring Sanga that her abilities are essential. He recognized her insecurity, knowing she didn't have the combat prowess of Hyewon and Hyunsung or the stealth of Gilyoung. He reminded her of their conversation in the subway, emphasizing that each member had a valuable contribution. Sanga's eyes lit up with renewed enthusiasm as she absorbed Dokja's words. He continued, explaining that someone needed to watch over Gilyoung Pildu and manage the group, especially considering the looming threat from Hohyeon Station. Her skills could be crucial for defending their base, complementing Pildu's abilities. He proposed granting her a formal role, and the group unanimously agreed. Dokja named her the vice representative of Chungmuro Station, a decision grounded in his trust in her abilities. Sanga is taken aback by the gesture but smiles gratefully, promising to do her best. To reach Dongmyo Station, they needed to traverse Dongdaemun History and Culture Park as well as Dongdaemun Station. Along the railway, Hyewon praised Dokja for lifting Sanga's spirits. However, Dokja attributed it to Sanga's capabilities rather than her appearance. Curious, she inquired about Junghyuk and how Dokja knew so much about him. Deflecting on the question, Dokja asks her about her brother that she was looking for in return. She admitted finding him annoying, but she couldn't help but care for him because he was family, a sentiment Dokja shared. However, Dokja's deep-seated resentment for Junghyuk stemmed from the early days of Tessa's story, when the first 10 episodes garnered extensive reader attention and comments. Amid their conversation, Hyunsung noted how close they had become, prompting a teasing comment from Hyewon. Dokja felt sympathy for Hyunsung, who had been too busy in his all-boys school and military life to make many friends. Turns out Hyunsung is trying to tell them that they arrived at Dongdaemun History and Culture Park, and they entered the station. To their surprise, no one was in sight, but a notification revealed that the station now belonged to Dongmyo Station, as indicated by the flag on the platform. Suddenly, Ilhan screamed about the takeover of his station, startling everyone. He couldn't comprehend the loss and collapsed, and Dokja tried to comfort him. It dawned on Dokja that Dongmyo's group sought to conquer Dongdaemun and Myeongdong stations during their absence, understanding that they couldn't face Chungmuro Station and win. He suspected that the individuals he had encountered earlier in Myeongdong were affiliated with Dongmyo Station. After Hyunsung laid Ilhan down, Dokja realized that these so-called prophets from Dongmyo had knowledge of Junghyuk's destiny as the leader of Chungmuro Station, and were clearly targeting him. Suddenly, Hyunsung felt the approach of someone, sending a wave of tension through the group. When the approaching individuals demanded Dokja's introduction, he activated his character profile skill in silence, only to find that it didn't reveal his character. Surprised by this development, Dokja quickly informed them that they hailed from Chungmuro Station. The man attempted to glean information using the search attribute skill, but Dokja's fourth wall blocked it, taking him aback. While the man was distracted by the unexpected block, Dokja, Hyunsung, and Hyewon poised themselves for an attack. Dokja realized that these individuals from Dongmyo likely knew about Junghyuk's destiny to lead Chungmuro. A sly grin crossed Dokja's face as he seized an opportunity, introducing himself as Junghyuk while attempting to mimic the man he despised. Hyunsung and Hyewon wore expressions of utter surprise, while the others visibly cringed upon hearing the name. Dokja, his confidence unwavering, believed he could successfully pull off the impersonation of Junghyuk. His awareness of his own good looks bolstered his conviction. He knew that they had read Tessa just as he had, and this only served to further confirm the lies he had spun. He allowed the man to search Hyunsung's character, thinking it would convince them further that Dokja is Junghyuk since Hyunsung is supposed to be Junghyuk's companion. However, Dokja didn't permit the search to continue for long. With a decisive tone, he called them off, asserting his control over the situation. One of them starts to bad-mouthing Dokja out of arrogance. In response, the other man swiftly struck the insolent man from behind with his sword. That strike knocked the man lifelessly, leaving Dokja, Hyunsung, and Hyewon in stunned disbelief. Having made his point, he introduced himself as Sungkook Lee, the vice representative of Dongmyo Station. As they arrived at Dongmyo Station, the hushed murmurs of the onlookers filled the air, a testament to the curiosity and suspicion surrounding the newcomers. Unintentionally, Hyunsung attempted to address Dokja by name. Hyewon, quick to protect their charade, swiftly punched Hyunsung's gut, silencing him and exposing Dokja. Since their meeting in Dongdaemun, Dokja had been masquerading as Junghyuk. Back then, when Sungkook had informed him of their origins, Dokja had played the role to perfection, ordering them to leave their station. Sungkook attempted to deflect the demand, but Dokja knew that as vice representative, Sungkook had the authority to hand over the station. Dokja, not one to be trifled with, threatened to end their lives in a count of 3. The trio before him trembled in fear while Hyunsung and Hyewon questioned the extent of Dokja's resolve. Upon reaching the count of 3, Dokja drew his sword and pointed it menacingly at Sungkook. The vice representative finally capitulated, agreeing to surrender the station to Dokja. But Dokja wasn't satisfied with just Dongnyeol. He also demanded Dongdaemun, and Sungkook complied with no other options. Sungkook, still apprehensive, proposed that Dokja meet with their leader. He even offered King's honor to seal the deal, a gesture Dokja couldn't refuse. As they enter the center of the camp, Sungkook directs Dokja to a tent. Dokja couldn't help but speculate about the identity of the leader who awaited him inside. As Dokja walks through the unfamiliar tent, his mind was filled with questions. He wonders if Sungkook possessed the same Tessa file as his own, and if he possessed the unique skills of fourth wall and character profile, just like he did. However, Dokja's curiosity was piqued when he noticed Sungkook utilizing the search attribute skill earlier. It led him to believe they might not share the same skills. Still, he couldn't help but wonder what Sungkook was engrossed in on his phone. With a decisive choice, Dokja decided to spend some of his precious coins to increase his speed. Swiftly, he moved behind Sungkook, startling the man and everyone around them. He inquired about what had captured Sungkook's attention on his phone. Sungkook, clearly taken aback by Dokja's sudden appearance, downplayed the matter, stating that it was nothing Dokja should concern himself with. However, when Dokja glanced at the screen, he was genuinely surprised. Sungkook is on a group chat, leaving Dokja to ponder how they could have internet connections, especially after Baeyoung sets up his channel. Dokja couldn't shake the suspicion that someone he knew from Tessa might be the mastermind behind this enigmatic realm. He began to piece together the puzzle, but Sungkook urged him to enter the tent. Meanwhile, Hyewon had her own observations. She noticed a group of people issuing orders to enslave people, directing them to the slaughtering ground rats. Dokja, aware of the need for caution, instructed her to remain vigilant and keep an eye on Hyunsung, ensuring he didn't inadvertently expose their cover. Hyewon saw an opportunity to tease Dokja and knelt in front of him, pledging to carry out his bidding. Inside the tent, Dokja had already deduced that the boy before him was none other than the future basement-dwelling King of the Shadows, the King of Dongmyeol. As Dokja activated his profiling skill, he swiftly gathered information about the boy, his name, supporting constellation, skill, stigma, and stats. Dinghunhan is why most of Seoul still had access to the internet. But fatigue weighed heavily on the boy as he sat in front of his computer. Taking advantage of his comment manipulation skill, he subtly steered the direction of the conversation within the group chat. When Sungkook introduced him, Dokja couldn't help but notice the extent of Dinghun's social anxiety. The boy's nervousness was so palpable that he found himself biting his fingers out of anxiety. Dokja, not one to mince words, made it clear that he had no intention of discussing business with a mere puppet. When he declared Sungkook as the true leader, his surprise was evident. Sungkook finally reveals the crucial detail. He needs to bring Dokja into the soundproof tent because he is one of the prophets as well. This revelation only intensified Dokja's burning curiosity, as he knew he was about to unearth the information he had been seeking. While Hyewon and Hyunsung stood near the tents with Ilhan, Sungkook's voice suddenly pierced the air, exclaiming loudly that only Younghyuk could regress. Dokja could only hope that this conversation is somehow getting filtered. As Sungkook continues to praise Younghyuk's courage in facing formidable adversaries for a greater cause, Dokja stands there, quietly listening. He couldn't deny that he was pretty impressed by the tales of Younghyuk's heroics. Dokja, without drawing much attention to himself, stole a glance at Dinghun, who was hunched over his computer. Sungkook then assured Dokja that the prophets would aid him in his battle against his adversaries during this regression. Somehow, Sungkook doesn't stop and begin revealing a book of revelations they had acquired a decade ago. At first, Dokja remained unconvinced, but as Sungkook described it, a suspicion began to creep into his mind. He wonders if the Book of Revelation is actually Tessa. Sungkook assumed that Younghyuk had companions like Hyunsung, Namwoon, and Jahai. However, Dokja's curiosity was piqued by the so-called Book of Revelations that they possessed. He couldn't help but wonder where it was. When Dokja inquired further, Sungkook regretfully informed him that the original copy of the book had been lost. Nevertheless, Sungkook insisted that their collective memory of its contents was strong and would be instrumental in helping Younghyuk emerge victorious this time. Dokja closed his eyes, taking a moment to absorb all this newfound information. After a brief pause, he looked at Sungkook with a determined expression and asked about his plan. Meanwhile, outside the tent, an unidentified man approaches Hyewon and Hyunsung and runs his mouth to them. At the same time inside the tent, Sungkook nervously proposed an alliance, aiming to align with Yoo Jong-hyuk. Dokja raised an intrigued eyebrow, considering the offer. He has his doubts, but he wants answers. Dokja challenged the order of the proposal, insisting on knowing his identity first. Sungkook stuttered, reluctant to comply with it. But Dokja had a method to uncover the truth. Dokja demanded that Sungkook kneel. Having no choice, he complied, and Dokja sought to unveil his attribute. Sungkook hesitated but finally admitted his attribute, hypnotist. Dokja acknowledged it with a nod, silently understanding who was hypnotizing Ilhan. But he wasn't finished yet. Dokja presses for more information, and after Sungkook's hesitation, he reveals he read Tessa. That makes Dokja's mind race with questions and ponders how many of these so-called prophets are. Out of curiosity, Dokja probes further, leaving Sungkook scrambling for an explanation. Dokja playfully teases him, making Sunkook flustered as he attempts to avoid being caught in a lie. Eventually, Sunkook admits he is the 9th person to stop reading Tessa, or so-called the Book of Revelation. However, Dokja dismisses his usefulness, but Sunkook keeps insisting that he can help. Lee Sunkook's anxiously handling his smartphone, which piques Dokja's curiosity. Though Dokja is already aware of it and suspects Sunkook seeks advice from other prophets, while it turns out he simply just had an addiction to the phone. Just as Sunkook is about to reveal more, the ground trembles and Dokja and Sunkook rush out of the tent. It turns out that Heewon has a fight with an unidentified man. That man ran his mouth and annoyed Heewon so much that she decided to talk back and mock him. Tensions escalated, insults flew like arrows, and it was clear that this confrontation wouldn't end without a clash of blades. The man drew a formidable weapon, a massive ring sword, revealing his skills were on par with Heewon's. But what he didn't anticipate was the astonishing agility of Heewon. Her movements were beyond the realm of ordinary incarnations of her class. Heewon's blade moved gracefully and precisely as the man launched his attack. In the nick of time, Dokja shouts Heewon's name, potentially preventing a deadly conflict. When the dust settled, Sunkook and the man kneel in front of Dokja and his companions as they apologize. Even in a tense moment, the man's pride prevents him from apologizing. Instead, he averts his face while mumbling his regret. Dokja, perplexed by the sudden ruckus, questions Heewon's disruptive behavior when he explicitly tells her to stay put. She attempts to explain that the man initiated the conflict, but sensing Dokja's disinterest, she begrudgingly apologizes and departs in frustration. The man is astonished, realizing that Dokja is none other than Young-hak. Urgently, he beckons Sunkook for a private conversation. Meanwhile, Dokja's gaze lingers on Ding-hoon, who remains engrossed in front of his computer screen. He wonders about the nature of Sunkook and his companion's discussion, prompting him to inquire of Baeyoung if he can purchase enhanced hearing for 2,000 coins, allowing him to eavesdrop on their conversation. To his dismay, Dokja overhears the man questioning Young-hak's authenticity based on his appearance, insinuating that he may not be the real Young-hak due to his perceived lack of attractiveness. Irritation wells up within Dokja in response to this shallow judgment. However, the man's curiosity extends to Heewon's identity, recalling that Namwoon was supposed to occupy her place in Young-hak's third regression. Dokja listens intently as they reveal their true plan to confront the prophets who have read Tessa up to 50 chapters. He prepares himself for their eventual return to ask him further. The man, now introducing himself as Min Seobyung, immediately faces Dokja's inquiry about his number, to which he responds as the 1089 renouncer. Dokja turns to Lee Sunkook, seeking information about the number of prophets. He learns that there are a total of 48 prophets. Dokja is taken aback by the relatively small number, prompting doubts to creep into his mind. Sunkook explains that he survived because of Min Seob, who had also read Tessa and had pressing questions of his own. The tension mounts as Min Seob probes further, particularly about Heewon replacing Namwoon. With finesse, Dokja navigates the conversation, addressing Min Seob's astute observations. He reveals the grim truth that Namwoon is already dead, killed at the hands of the prophets. Shock courses through them as the revelation sinks in, and Dokja recounts his own experiences and actions, leaving both Min Seob and Sunkook visibly surprised. Dokja adds that the prophet who impersonated Young-hak poses a significant threat to Chungnyeoro. The gravity of the situation dawns on Sunkook and Min Seob as they sense a brewing conspiracy. Making the constellation's secretive plotter acknowledges Dokja's audacity, while Sunkook hints at his familiarity with the figure Dokja mentions, unaware that the true prophet stands before them. Sunkook hints at the complexity of the prophet alliances, revealing that not all prophets are aligned with the same goals and agendas. There are those who call themselves the 12 Apostles. When Dokja is regrouping with Hyunsung and Heewon, he sighs in relief because he can take off his Young-hak mask for a moment. When Hyunsung wants to discuss their next move, Dokja tells them to wait and make a telepathic group chat so no one can overhear them. It was all because his flag had turned navy color after possessing 5 stations, but he didn't get Changsan Station. That's supposed to be his target station because the 12 Apostles had occupied his target station. They're the ones who had read Tessa up to 50 episodes, and the number adds up to the number of views that Tessa had. Back then, when Sunkook tells Dokja that 11 of them were known, and their ambition was grand, they sought to conquer the world using the knowledge they had gained. Sunkook implored Dokja's assistance in stopping them, and Dokja reluctantly agreed, with one condition, the acquisition of Changsan Station. However, the Tyrant King had beaten him to it. These apostles' presence and the prophet's involvement seemed to have accelerated the plot. The Tyrant King's rise to power had been expedited, and the world teetered on the edge of chaos. Dokja shares this troubling information with his companions. Young Heewon vaguely comprehended the gravity of the situation, while Lee Hyunsung was taken aback. He hadn't expected Sunkook and Min Seob to possess knowledge of the future, now understanding why Dokja had concealed his true identity. Hyunsung proposes staying to gather more intelligence on their newfound adversaries, but Dokja disagrees vehemently. He reveals the existence of a secret weapon the prophets possessed, designed to combat the apostles and the Tyrant King. Dokja knows he has to intervene and put an end to this impending catastrophe. His audacious declaration surprised both Hyunsung and Hee-won. They were left to grapple with the weight of the impending battle. With resolve in his heart, Dokja slipped past the drowsy guards, shrouded in an invisible cloak. His destination is Dinghoon's tent, fortified with sound wave blocking, ensuring their privacy. Silently approaching from behind, Dokja stifles Dinghoon's startled cry, his grip unyielding. Despite Dinghoon's futile struggles, Dokja's level 10 strength proved insurmountable. Dokja retrieved the mental awakening medicine from his pocket, a costly expenditure of 3,000 coins, alongside the recluse's cloak. Sometime after being fed the meds, Dinghoon's eyes changed. The hypnosis effect loosened, and the boy's sense of reason returned. Dinghoon immediately steps back while holding the flag in his hand. Dokja tells him he doesn't need to worry because he's not to take the flag. Instead, he offers friendship to Dinghoon. Amidst the growing tension, Dokja notices that Dinghoon refuses to engage in conversation due to his social anxiety. Determined to communicate with him, Dokja takes out his phone and suggests they communicate through text instead. Dinghoon silently activates his skill called Wide Area Internet Level 5 on his phone in response. A message from Dinghoon appears on Dokja's screen, inquiring about his identity. A smile crept across Dokja's face, knowing that his strategy to connect with Dinghoon began to work. He replies, stating that he had been searching for him. Dokja is well aware that Dinghoon harbored deep resentment towards the prophets. He offers to rid Dinghoon of them, but Dinghoon accuses him of merely wanting to exploit his powers. Contrary to his assumption, Dokja expressed his desire for Dinghoon to refrain from taking any action in the future. Meanwhile, Sunkook was engrossed in his phone while Minseob pondered what their group should do after resolving their conflict with the apostles. Sunkook admits that no one in their group chat believed their claims. In response, Minseob decides to attempt to reason with the others. However, their connection began to falter, and Sunkook had a sinking feeling that Dinghoon might have fallen asleep and caused the internet to disconnect. As Minseob approaches the front of the tent and checks on Dinghoon, he hits something invisible and stumbles to the ground. To their surprise, Dokja had been there all along, concealed by his cloak. Suddenly, Hee-won opened the tent and informed Dokja that she and Hyunsung would be outnumbered if the fight continued. Sunkook and Minseob are puzzled by this development. Still believing Dokja to be Younghyuk, Sunkook tells him he could win against his group. Dokja assured them that he didn't intend to fight all of them, and with a swift motion, he used his sword to cut Minseob's clothing, revealing the actual flag of Dongmyo. It became evident that Minseob was the real leader of the station group, a conclusion Dokja had suspected ever since knowing that they read Tessa. They knew that Dinghoon was supposed to lead Dongmyo, but they took it from him. As soon as Dokja picks up the flag, it turns brown, protecting him by its power. Sunkook wonders why he did what he did, and Dokja is reluctant to give him answers. Instead, he reveals that he's not the real Younghyuk and mocks them for not finishing reading Tessa. The following day, Dokja awoke in the afternoon, realizing he now owned 9 stations. Upon checking his phone, he realized he had slept for an extended period. He then stepped out of his tent and encountered Hee-won and Hyunsung, who were waiting for him. Hee-won suggests they return to Chungmuro, but Dokja's gaze shifted towards Sunkook and Minseob, who flinched as they met his eyes. After a conversation with them, Dokja decided to spare their lives and allowed them to join Chungmuro, recognizing their usefulness. They agreed to keep his secret, bound by an oath that would kill them if they acted independently. Dokja was pleased with their compliance while Hee-won and Hyunsung observed their conversation closely. Dokja then requested Minseob's fugitive's mask, which he used to change his face to Younghyuk's, astonishing Sunkook and Minseob with the revelation of Younghyuk's striking appearance. As Dokja attempted to inquire about Minseob's attributes, his profiling skill revealed that Minseob's character had been updated since their first encounter. He then asked Sunkook to hand over his phone, leaving them without masks or communication devices. Dinghoon suddenly activated an internet skill and expressed his trust in Dokja for the first time. Dokja smiled and thanked him, prompting Dinghoon's constellation, Shadow Behind the Curtains, to feel grateful and grant Dokja 500 coins. Dokja's attention was drawn to the realization that there were only 36 prophets in the group chat, none of whom were the apostles. Minseob inquired if Dokja had knowledge of the revelation because he had completed it. Dokja scoffed, suggesting they should be grateful they had met him instead of Younghyuk. As they continued their journey, Dokja perused the chat and grew irritated by discussions regarding the possibility of a remaining free copy of Tessa. Soon after, Sunkook announced their arrival at Anguk Station, where they could hear whispers about Younghyuk echoing from the end of the railway. When they arrive at the station, Dokja notices that Anguk hasn't been taken over by other stations, evident by the absence of any flags on the platform. Then, Minseob greets announcer number 763, and they converse about the chaotic situation since the Tyrant King's takeover of Changsan. Dokja discreetly observes from the sidelines, pretending to be Younghyuk. as Minseob reveals that Dokja is, in fact, the real Young-hyuk. He immediately garners attention and bows before Dokja. Some people compliment his good looks, and it doesn't take long for Dokja to find himself surrounded by curious onlookers. Though initially overwhelmed, Dokja's presence soon takes a backseat as someone else demands to hear about Young-hyuk's experiences directly. He introduces himself as the 1168 renouncer, signifying his status as the most well-read person in the station. While Dokja answers his questions, Hyunsung is left blushing as a few women praise him. Conversely, Hee-won is baffled by people continuously mistaking her for Jihai. Observing the growing crowd around him, Dokja humorously compares the prophets gathering to a farmer's market. He decides to inquire about their ultimate weapon, and someone points him toward the center of the platform, where a massive meteorite is revealed. To Dokja's shock, it was the same meteorite he had seen falling on the cinema rooftop a few days ago. The man explains that the meteorite may contain a potent artifact with immense power, and they are attempting to expedite its hatching by supplying it with mana for a few days. Dokja is taken aback, realizing that only those who have read Young-hyuk's fourth regression could possess information about a red meteorite. He confronts the man, demanding to know who brought it here. The man mentions the 1124 renouncer but notes that he hasn't arrived yet. In a panic, Dokja urges everyone to evacuate the station, convinced it's a trap. However, the meteorite begins to move on its own, raising alarm among the gathered crowd. Dokja regrets trusting people who haven't read Tessa to the end. As he attempts to flee, a barrier suddenly materializes in front of him, leaving him with no option but to confront the imminent danger. Constellations watch with keen interest as the situation unfolds. Dokja urgently communicates with his party through a group chat, advising them to stand behind him now that escape is impossible. He silently curses that with the fourth scenario still running, he has to face the catastrophe from the fifth scenario. Meteorites can contain precious treasures or deadly threats depending on their size and color. Dokja knows that this meteorite should never be allowed to hatch. The meteorite begins to crack, and a notification confirms the onset of the fifth scenario. Driven by curiosity, one man gets too close to the meteorite, only to meet a tragic end when it emits a scorching beam, instantly killing him. Dokja can only hope that whatever lurks inside the meteorite isn't a major catastrophe. Panic spreads among the onlookers as the meteorite oozes lava, followed by the emergence of a clawed hand. Hee-won wonders what kind of monster it is while Dokja braces himself, realizing that a fire dragon called Lesser Dragon Ignir has emerged. He informs Hee-won that it's a catastrophe, a dire threat in the fifth scenario. Other people try to reach Dokja for help, so he tells them to move to a corner, while telling Hee-won there will likely be an intervention, as a fire dragon of this magnitude shouldn't appear in the fourth scenario. True to his words, a Dokkaebi appears, but it's not Baeyoung. The Dokkaebi berates the people for awakening a catastrophe in the fourth scenario. While Dokja is surprised that it's a mid-level Dokkaebi instead of Baeyoung, it manages to restrain the dragon. However, someone protests about the difficulty level, leading the Dokkaebi to decide to modify the scenario instead of lowering its difficulty. The Dokkaebi snaps his fingers, and everyone receives a new sub-scenario, instructing them to defeat the dragon or survive its attacks for 20 minutes. Hyunsung wonders if they should try to kill the dragon, but Dokja knows it's impossible. Even if Young-hyuk were here, he couldn't take down a tier 5 dragon. As the Dokkaebi vanishes, letting the dragon moves to feast on the people, Dokja instructs everyone to run clockwise. The dragon breathes fire, narrowly missing Hee-won. Dokja knows there's more to come and must devise further survival strategies. Dokja tells his party to find safe zone when suddenly hidden pieces appear on the floor, resembling the green zone and indicating how many people each can hold. People begin to fight for these safe zone, resorting to violence. Dokja becomes convinced that it's the work of the apostles, who seek to eliminate the prophets by creating chaos and reducing the number of people who know the future. While Minseob and Hee-won struggle to find the safe zone, Sungkook manages to locate one, and they begin to gather. However, this safe zone can only accommodate 4 people inside, leaving them with a difficult choice ahead. The dragon growls and is ready to fire his destructive flame, and Dokja wonders if he should sacrifice someone. Then, someone offers Dokja a place, making relief run through him when he runs toward the zone and tells his party to activate theirs. The shield immediately activates as soon as Dokja steps on the zone, and not long after, the dragon spits out fire across the station. But those people inside the zones are protected by the shield. Dokja looks at the 1168 renouncer and asks who he really is. He had asked about how Young-hyuk fought Asmodeus, but Dokja knows the scene of the confrontation between Demon King Asmodeus and Jong-hyuk. To be precise, in the second regression, Jong-hyuk was one-sidedly beaten by the Demon King, which is told in the 57th episode. Dokja prepares to use his sword if he doesn't reveal his identity. Dokja put his sword next to his neck and accused him of being one of the apostles. The man immediately admits that he's the 1195 renouncer and he's, in fact, the fifth among them. The shield begins to disappear when Dokja asks if this is their trap or if it's caused by the butterfly effect. The man denies it, claiming the birth of the dragon is because of the butterfly effect, which Dokja finds hard to believe. Meanwhile, the dragon keeps killing every in range when Sungkook asks for Dokja's help. Dokja holds his ground, urging Sungkook to memorize the attack pattern and evade. Protection is impossible now, not with an apostle in their midst. Dokja then asks the man what he wants from him, but he tells him he could save his life. Turns out the man knows Dokja masquerading as Young-hyuk will be here. As the conversation unfolds, a sudden attack from the dragon interrupts them, prompting a swift evasion. They narrowly escape its fiery wrath. Then the safe zones start reappearing, and the apostles kill someone occupying the zone first before telling Dokja that he actually doesn't intend to come if Dokja isn't here. The dragon started to breathe fire again when the apostle tells Dokja that he intends to hunt the dragon. Suddenly, a penalty shows up, stating that the number of safe zone will be reduced in the next round. He-1 curses at this unfortunate turn of events. Dokja doubts that they could kill the dragons, but when he tells Dokja that they came prepared, Dokja immediately notices that he doesn't sweat. That makes Dokja wonders if they got the blue ice pills after hunting down some elementals in the western area. Those pills will allow them to exude ice energy for half an hour. However, Dokja is still sure he couldn't kill the dragon alone. When he tells Dokja that he didn't come alone, Dokja notices 5 other people extrude ice energy. While the dragon keeps killing people, the announcer asks for Dokja's help, and if Dokja agrees, he will give him the blue ice pills. He offers Dokja a way for him and his party to survive, but Dokja is pretending to be Young-hyuk, so he needs to act like him. Dokja tells him he doesn't care about his companion, claiming that people can be replaced. With unbroken faith raised menacingly, Dokja challenges the apostles, but they counter with a proposition. They reveal their plan to take control of Chungnyeoro Station, a critical point in their game. He then mentions Jihai, Gillian, Sanga, and Pildu, making Dokja realize the length they went through to get Young-hyuk, which makes Dokja surprised by how daring they are. Then, as they run towards the empty zone, Dokja asks about their king, and the apostles tell him that he's someone who has read all the revelations and knows Jong-hyuk's past and future. Dokja is intrigued by the idea of another reader who has read all of the novel that he stops right in front of the zone. He-1 worries for him, but Dokja assures her he'll be fine. Dokja finally realizes that these apostles have a well-thought-out strategy. The last thing he could do is use his knowledge of their fear to his advantage, suggesting that their existence may be tied to his survival. Dokja turns toward the dragon. The apostles become alarmed as they realize the implications of Dokja's words. They start to pursue Dokja, who gets even closer to the dragon that will spit fire anytime. Fortunately, Dokja is fast enough to get under the dragon before it breathes fire, and with a final act of bravery, Dokja plants his flag in Anguk Station and achieves the King's Path attribute. Dokja chose King of No Killing to be his title, while the apostles scrambled to escape the flames as a wave of flames covered them. That is a magnitude of an attack that couldn't be endured even if they ate the ice pill. When the dragon finishes devouring the extras, it turns toward Dokja and aims its fire at him. He-1 and Hyunsung are screaming, telling him to go away. Instead, Dokja doesn't go anywhere. Somehow he stands there nonchalantly without doing anything to evade or blocking the fire. His armor set breaks down one after another as he's engulfed with fire, as a notification tells him that he has met his demise. The next thing that happens is he wakes up gasping for air and coughing. One of the most painful deaths in the world is burning to death, and he has just experienced it. The pain slowly recedes, and he finds himself again at the fourth wall. He always feels strange when he escapes trouble with the help of this skill. Tessa has become a reality, and he is living in it, but he can't shake the feeling of a wall that separates him from the world. He decides to think about it later as he contemplates what to do once he wakes up. But a notification tells him that the effect of the King of No Killing has been delayed due to a conflicting personal skill. Now that his soul is separated from his body, the third level of the Omniscient Reader Viewpoint skill is automatically activated, making Dokja dizzy. Meanwhile, in Chungnyeoro, Pildu sulks in front of the flag with Gillian asleep on his knee. He's angry when he hears Gillian call Dokja in his sleep, reminiscing about when he was the family's breadwinner and earned money to feed them. Suddenly, Sanga appears and tries to convince Pildu of the benefits of friendship where he remains skeptical. Sanga sits hesitantly next to Pildu, showing interest in his land ownership. Meanwhile, Dokja is shocked as he witnesses what's happening in Chungnyeoro Station and wonders if this is what level 3 of Omniscient Reader Viewpoint can do. Then, a sound is heard in the distance. Sanga's expression hardens, and Gillian wakes up from sleeping on Pildu's knees. Sanga immediately stands up, and Pildu tells everyone to gather. From the darkness, ground rats approach Chungnyeoro, and Pildu activates his skill. Sanga, with urgency in her voice, rallies the survivors on the platform. They scatter, but not in chaos. They move with precision, adhering to the practice plan. Group A converges on the turrets, Group B takes the center of the battlefield, and Group C protects Pildu. The ground rats approach in masses, as the turrets shoot raining bullets, instantly decimating them. The coordinated assault swiftly takes down the ground rats, highlighting the power of cooperation. However, from the darkness emerges an unfamiliar group, 4 men and 1 woman. Pildu's expression darkens as he realizes these newcomers are different from their previous enemies. He needs to find Jihai, but she's already among them, and Pildu feels slightly calmer. The atmosphere grows tense when Jihai stands beside Pildu while he demands answers from the newcomers. One of them mockingly reveals that the Maritime Admiral and Armed Fortress Master have joined forces. Pildu threatens them, but they pay him no heed, continuing to discuss how many went to hunt dragon and the rest of them should be enough to take down Chungnuro. Among them is a man in his 30s with a bulging belly who oozes arrogance and starts mocking Jihai for being powerless on land. She got annoyed quickly, and it didn't take long for her to charge forward, along with Pildu firing his weapons. Dokja watches from behind and worries for his group, as their enemy is well prepared. They even have a shield to protect themselves from Pildu's weapon. However, Jihai's strength and determination have grown beyond her previous self as she fiercely fights against the man who just mocked her. Chaos erupts as the Chungnuro group pushes back the apostles, but Dokja notices the man with the hood deploying a powerful weapon, the mass destruction magic bullet. The explosion is massive, leaving devastation and injuries in its wake. Dokja is angered as he realizes the man with the purple flag is the king of the apostles. The situation becomes dire, and injuries mark the aftermath of the explosion. Jihai's small body shook in the air, her lips tremble, staring at the empty railway crying out for help. That's where exactly Dokja stands at, as a surge of impulsive anger suddenly consumed him. One that usually enjoys the new life wanting to be on the sidelines, Dokja is losing it. But he couldn't help but feel sorry for her. All he knows about her until now is merely a supporting extra, but right at this moment it all settled in, where suddenly his proficiency in the Omniscient Reader Viewpoint skill increases as he becomes more immersed in the world. His world constricted and stretched like a rubber band. When he opens his eyes again, he finds himself set foot in Chungnuro. Jihai's shaky gaze locked onto him. But it wasn't just her, everyone on the platform was fixated on his arrival as well. But Dokja feels discomfort surged. It was like wearing ill-fitting clothes with different heights and senses. He could feel himself grip his sword, and the blade moved soundlessly as he cut off the head of the 7th apostles. Everyone is surprised by what's happening as Dokja catches Jihai, who's about to fall to the ground, and lightly places Li Jihai down on the platform. He raised his eyes and saw the apostles looking his way. As Dokja now is able to understand what's happening when Younghyuk says everyone attacking Chungnuro will die there. Not long after, the effect of King of No Killing resumed and began to revive Dokja from death. He immediately notices the dragon and remembers that he's still fighting that creature. Now, he could rest assured that Chungnuro would be safe. Back then, it was a truly unique experience for Dokja. He had shared a first-person point of view with Jonghyuk, and he could feel how he walked, how he grabbed his sword, and that chillingly quick cut. Dokja doesn't want to experience it again and wonders how he could do it in the first place when a notification informs him that there'll be a reward for using the 3rd level of Omniscient Reader Viewpoint. When Dokja turned his gaze, he could see Hyewon shouting from afar. Her face was astounded as Hyunsung held onto her. Fortunately, they were all safe. As Dokja tries to run away from the dragon, he seeks a safe zone that could hold one person. But he can't find them. This time, he couldn't risk being killed because King of No Killing could only be used when he had 100 karma points, which could only be gained after he saved someone's life. Since his points had fallen to 0, the resurrection privilege couldn't be used for a while. Seeing how Dokja couldn't find any safe zone that suit their number, Hyewon tells Hyunsung to go over the zone that could hold 2 people. Hyunsung rushes towards Dokja, and they enter the zone together, barely making it because the dragon quickly breathes fire again. Then Hyunsung looks like he's about to cry when he sees that Dokja is alright. Dokja asks if there's something to wear amidst the chaos because he's completely naked. Hyunsung is surprised to see him bare. Because of Dokja's resurrection, his clothes and belongings are reduced to ashes, leaving him with his birthday suits. Hyunsung, ever the loyal companion, offers Dokja his clothes, but Dokja quickly rejects them. Because Dokja soon realizes that not everything is lost. Some items, like the unbroken faith and the flag, survive the flames. Yet, they remain out of reach for others because it's right underneath the dragon. Soon, Hyewon, Sungkook, and Minseob approach them, and Dokja immediately hides himself. Seeing his discomfort, Hyewon offers Dokja her robe to cover himself, and they both feel awkward about it. Suddenly, the dragon roars at them, and Dokja tells everyone to run away. He tries to think of some strategies when he notices that the apostles are no more, their defeat evident in the scattered ice pills. Then, the dragon's paw flew through the air, and another 2 extras running behind Dokja were crushed. The battlefield falls silent, and only Dokja's party remains. Dokja seizes the moment, recovering the brown flag and unbroken faith, then quickly runs toward his party. They got lucky when they found a safe zone that could hold 5 people when the dragon spit his fire. The intermediate Dokjubai's voice could be heard in the air in the middle of the chaos, and he asked how long they would push their luck. Hyewon asks what they should do, and Dokja tells her that their only option is to fight it. He points to the ice pills rolling around on the floor. The number is exactly a match for them. If they eat it, it wasn't impossible to damage the dragon. However, the question is whether they could kill it before the next full attack began. Hyunsung and Hyewon's skills are complementary, so he needs a plan that works. In order to get rid of the lesser dragon as quickly as possible, he needs to raise his magic power instead of his strength. Then Dokja picked up an ice pill and swallowed it. He starts to radiate ice energy while he wonders if Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint could be used to find its weakness. That thought makes Dokja realize there's a reward for using the 3rd level, so he reads his notification while running away from the dragon. He immediately stops running when the reward states that he can take one of the character's skills, meaning he could use one of Young-hyuk's skills. However, Dokja is too puzzled to see the flying paw of the dragon. Hee-won's body pushed against him as she grabbed him away, and the paw landed where he used to be. They both slide and crash to a nearby wall. When he sees a list of skills he could choose, Dokja already has his hopes up. But he's pissed when it's just a usual skill, not a top-tier skill. Dokja takes a moment of silence because the answers lie in his skill as a reader. The pages flash quickly in his head, and he keeps reading them while Hee-won urges him to decide quickly. Dokja decides to choose the cold resistance and tells Hyunsung and Hee-won to hand over their pills to Sunkook and Minseob. Minseob and Sunkook's eyes widened as they were about to put the ice pill in their mouths. Dokja quickly receives the 4 ice pills. He avoided the flames and poured all of the pills into his mouth. Soon, he's covered with ice, and the effect of those pills will increase the attribute damage. He would have never done this in a normal situation, since the ice pill was actually a type of poison. Eating one would feel like standing naked in the middle of winter, but the skill he gained from Young-hyuk could protect him from this massive effect. He shouts to everyone to get behind him as he draws his sword, and his current state activates another unique property in his sword called Blade of Faith. The ether blade became a dark blue. It was due to the overlay of ice and darkness. Now that he's standing face to face with the dragon, Dokja also activates the sword song Stigma. The buff ability varied according to the song of the sword verse. The dragon starts to roar, and as it approaches Dokja, some part of its scales begins to glow red, making Dokja wonder if he's showing Dokja his weak point. With the blessing of the naval warfare god, Dokja launched himself toward the dragon with his sword ready to pierce through its skin. The dragon roared in pain when Dokja stabbed it at the red light on its chest. But the attack fails to finish it off, and flames start to gather at its mouth. Signifies the dragon's attack phase is starting again. Now, Dokja is worried whether his party could be lucky enough to find a safe zone that matched their number. Dokja had used all his magic power, and the elongated ether blade struck its chest. He keeps swinging his sword with the thought that he can't be wrong about this. A sharp sense of emotion came as he wielded his sword in a trance. Young-hyuk's sword is swift and silent. The sensation is firmly embedded in him. Dokja grabs the hilt with all his strength and recalls the feeling of that moment with his senses. The sword moves, and Dokja hears something burst. It was the sound of flesh exploding. The dragon roared in pain as a high-temperature dust flew across the station. Dokja lands near the dragon and wonders if he succeeds, only to get hit by its claw. If only he was the main character, he could use that one blow to finish it off, but sadly, he's just a reader. When the dragon began its attack again, Hee-won quickly tried to find another zone. Meanwhile, Dokja grits his teeth and is determined to win because he refuses to give up, even if he's just a reader. Dokja throws his sword at the dragon's chest as a last resort. His blade pierces right through its heart and quickly freezes it. The dragon slowly freezes over until it dies, making Dokja the first person to kill a minor catastrophe. Meanwhile, the chief of the Soul Branch, Baram, frowns when he reads a review request about a Young-hyuk as a regressor. He asks his employee who made the request, and he tells Baram that it's from a branch in Japan. Some had already speculated the same thing because Young-hyuk could have a high level of skills from the beginning, and some information he had is automatically censored. The Dokkaebis need to put in a request to the higher-ups if they want to know more about him. Baram scoffs and tells his employees they shouldn't be worried about him and focus on watching the 5th scenario. Back to Dokja. He's pulling his sword out of the dead dragon and taking its nucleus as well. He gets a hold of the Tier 5 dragon nucleus when the mid-level Dokkaebi appears and requests a plausibility review. Suddenly, Hee-won slaps Dokja from the back, making him falter because the slap is too hard. At the same time, Dokja receives many messages from the constellation praising his bravery against the dragon. Hee-won asks if he knew this would happen, and Dokja says he doesn't know everything. That answer agitates Hee-won even more, so she slaps him repeatedly while Hyunsung and Minseob quickly approach him. After she calms down, Dokja explains that he could be resurrected because of his new attribute. But to do that, he needs to save 100 lives before using it again. He explains to her that because of this attribute, he can't afford to kill someone because he'll lose it as soon as he does. Hee-won happily tells him that she'll do it for him, and Hyunsung is amazed that these fictional skills exist. Sunkook and Minseob flinch because they know Hyunsung is also supposed to be a fictional character. Dokja immediately glares at them, so they don't say anything about it. Where he asks why Dokja is suddenly being so nice to them. He replies that it's only part of pretending to be Young-hyuk, and then he asks for his phone. He had lost most of his valuable belongings, including his phone. That's why he's taking Sunkook's phone, but he's afraid that he won't recover Tessa. However, when he opens the phone, it immediately tells him that he can connect his old data to this phone, and after a few seconds Tessa is automatically downloaded through his new phone. Indeed, a file that couldn't be read by the Dokubi or constellations couldn't disappear so easily. Now, he needs to be cautious and not let any prophets read this. Suddenly, Dokja heard Baehyung complain that he had been called to the management many times because of Dokja. He wonders why the higher-ups couldn't access his data. Dokja asks if they decided to penalize him, but Baehyung defends him, and they decide to let him be because he's not at the point where he's powerful enough to have an unfair advantage in scenarios. It made Dokja relieved to hear it because he purposely didn't level his passive skills in case this happened. Baehyung warns him that the mid-level Dokubi is gunning for him, so he must be careful because it'll be difficult for him now. The said Dokubi appears and apologizes not long after because their rewards were delayed. Dokja immediately swarms with messages about his reward for completing the scenario and killing the dragon. He's pretty pleased that he earns the protection symbol of the immuter because it will be useful for him in the 5th scenario, and he notices others got a pretty good reward. But he wonders if this is all he got. Then the Dokubi says the Bureau reports a mismatch between local incarnation's skills and scenario difficulty. So, he takes it upon himself to adjust the scenario's difficulty. Dokja silently curses at him for making things more complicated, and not long after, a notification stating that the 4th scenario's time limit is drastically reduced, throwing everyone that survive into a frenzy. The consequences of failure are dire because death awaits those who can't complete their mission. After a while, Sanga tries to help other injured people when she notices Dokja, Hyewon, and Hyunsung have returned to Chungnyeoro. Hyunsung and Hyewon didn't know what happened in Chungnyeoro and ran towards the people with an aghast expression. People around the platform were bleeding. Then Minseop notices heads lying around on the railway, hugging Gilyoung. Dokja immediately knows this is Younghyak's doing. Suddenly, the man he's thinking about returns after throwing the head of the Apostle King across the rails. Younghyak is definitely different from the rest of them, and he's merciless toward anyone threatening him. Then, out of nowhere, the King of the Apostles starts yelling and accusing Dokja of ruining his plan, surprising everyone including Dokja. During their walk back to Chungnyeoro, Dokja learns about how the prophets gather and their mysterious leader. Minseop tells him the prophets were called together by the first apostle, who claimed to be a true reader. But as the story continued, this person's identity became increasingly doubtful. When Dokja thought about the information he had until now, he didn't seem like a reader. Dokja still couldn't believe what he saw. Even in Tessa, the skills that could be used even when the head was cut off are extremely rare. It's possible if he uses Immortal Delay, but even with that skill, he couldn't stay in a state with his head cut off. Besides, there was no blood from the cut neck. Dokja jumps from the platform and approaches the head while he thinks about all of the information that he received from Sunkook and Minseop, a man who revealed himself to all prophets and claimed to be a true reader. He appeared all over Seoul as soon as the scenario began and gathered people who had read Tessa. In addition, it was possible to pass through the barriers between scenarios, and he didn't die when his head was cut and there was no blood. Dokja becomes certain that this is the Avatar skill. The severed head is wondering who Dokja actually is, but Dokja doesn't say anything. Dokja slowly looked him up and down before asking if he was a writer. The man looks surprised that Dokja figured out his identity, which will only be told in the next chapter.